it's Sarah. I hope you're well. It's been a few weeks since I've done a video. I've had quite a few things going on here. I hope you're all surviving well during lockdown. Sorry, just putting my lights on because it's all a bit dark in here. Anyway, so I hope you're all doing well. I know I've got a couple of videos I need to catch you guys up on, which I will do. Just had a couple of weeks off, things I needed to sort out for myself. But I thought I would cover a subject today around career conversations, because very often there's many conversations in life we put off, you know, sometimes, and I find this with a lot of people that I'm coaching with in terms of their careers, that very often we're in the mindset of feeling, and I know that this can feel particularly poignant at the moment with lockdown. I know some of us are worried about what's going on in the economy. You might be in a sector that's suffering, for example, but I'm still working with people and coaching people that are managing sort of to create and see opportunities despite everything else that's going on in the outside world. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the career conversations you could be having and how to have them. So it's a massive subject, so I can't cover everything. But I'll give you a few general guidance points, a few tips around career development conversations you might want to have. And what I want to remind you is that your career is really as much down to you as your line manager. I think, I know certainly earlier on in my career, it took me a while to grasp this, that actually the fortune in my career and what happened in my career was up to me, really. This is where self-leadership comes in, really leading from the outside in, as I call it, making sure that we are asking for what we want in the right way, negotiating for what we want, particularly, that's not a word, particularly if we're valued, if a company wants to keep us, you know, if they're showing an interest, but even in sort of times that are a little bit more difficult and you feel like, do you know what, my best option is to stay where I am at the moment, you can still have those two-way conversations. So don't let the outside world affect too much about how you apply yourself to your career. And what I'm saying is, like, don't be passive. Your career is a two-way street. Yes, it's about the company wanting to employ you, but it's about you wanting to either stay at the company or leave at the company. And don't forget, it costs a lot of money for companies to replace people. So you are a valuable asset. Unless you've had some particular discussions around performance, perhaps there's been discussions around that, but even if there have been performance questions, that's still a two-way conversation. That's not a kind of, I'm going to hide away and ignore it, because your career development is really as much up to you as it is the other company. Even with the company that you're with or whoever you're working with, even if you do decide to part ways, that can still be sometimes a two-way conversation. If you're being made redundant, that's a two-way conversation. You don't have to take everything that's being said to you as read. So, for example, you know, let me just cover that off because of what's going on in the world. If you are in a situation where perhaps your job's at risk, then see what you can do to negotiate the best options for yourself. Make sure that you've got some advice around, you know, if I am leaving, has everything been factored in? My day's holiday, my sick leave, any bonus that, although bonuses can be discretionary, any bonus that might be due for the performance that's happened whilst I've been here. So I guess the overall message is self-leadership, you know, and even if things don't work out quite the way you planned, you will know that you actually had a healthy discussion. It will build your confidence to have these discussions in the future, and you'll know you'll have tried your damnedest to put yourself in the best position. So let's not be passive. Let's be in the driving seat of our careers. It's a two-way street. You deserve, you know, whatever it is you think and believe you deserve, and you provide value. I'm sure all of you in the roles that you're doing provide value to a company. And even if it is time to part ways, again, don't be passive. Show up in a professional light. Show up with confidence and assertiveness. Really steel yourself for what might be some difficult conversations. But it's not just your boss steering it. I know it can feel like that, but you can still have an opportunity to say your piece. But by all means, say it in a professional way, in a win-win way, not in a negative, whining, victim kind of way, because that's not going to help you, whether you're trying to negotiate a better position or negotiate your way out of a company or a better package to leave a company. Now, one of the first things is that really, if there is any kind of conversation going on about your career, don't be hijacked. Sometimes somebody might say, can I have a word with you about something? Make sure you're in the right frame of mind to have that conversation. If somebody's having a conversation and you're worried about it, you don't have to react. Reacting is never very good. We all do it at times. We all react and get a bit emotional, a bit triggered. But sit, take a deep breath and respond. And if you don't feel you're composed enough to respond, just listen. Maybe take some notes if you wish to. And just say, okay, let me reflect. My words today. Let me reflect and let me come back to you when I've had a chance to take on board what you've said. Do you see what I mean? You're coming at it from a professional, proactive perspective. So don't be hijacked. And maybe, you know, if somebody wants to have quite a serious or in-depth conversation about your career, you know, is there an opportunity to say to that person, do you know what I'd really like to do is understand what the meeting, you know, what will this be about? What would you like to discuss? And could we agree a suitable time when I'm less busy? Could we agree a time that suits both of us? I'll find time in our calendar. What time of day best suits you? Do you know what I mean? So come at it from a kind of win-win situation basis. So try not to be hijacked. See if you can find out what the meeting is about if you're being called to the meeting, or perhaps you are the one that is calling the meeting to discuss your career, in which case with your boss I'd always recommend warming it up and saying to your boss or your superior, you know, look, I'd really like to have a conversation with you about my career direction. It's something I'm really passionate about, really interested in. You pick the words that work for you, you know, and can we agree, you know, could we sit down, can I put some time in your diary to discuss this? Because your boss won't like to be hijacked either. They've got enough on their plate. So don't let yourself be hijacked. Don't hijack your boss either. And the right conversations can be at the right, sometimes, as I've mentioned at the beginning, it might not be a positive conversation, but you can still ask the questions you need to ask, have the representation you need to have, and see if you want to stay. Is there any room for negotiation? Are there other roles that I could explore? You know, discuss your skills, discuss your strengths, discuss where actually I think my strengths could apply here. Don't write it off. Don't become the victim of that situation. Be fully professional as though you were having, you know, a conversation with a customer. You know, really think about if it does mean that you may well be leaving, still handle that in the right way. You know, you don't have to respond straight away. Just sort of say, okay, I'd like to take some time to read the information, and if you need to, get some help legally to work through some things. But an effective career conversation, a more positive one, really centres on you and your career aspiration. You know, is it a chance? You know, are you creating those chances in your interactions with whoever manages you to discuss your current role? Are you creating opportunities for your hopes for the future? And let's not just leave that to a 1 year annual appraisal, because a lot can happen in a year and you'll be sitting there, you could be sitting there stewing and tolerating things that could be fixed really quickly in a conversation. So make sure you are having that regular interaction, quality time with your boss to discuss your career. And if they won't make time for you, then that's something that you need to bring up with them and just say, look, I'd really like to discuss how we work together. I'd like to have time with you to discuss certain things that I'm working on and my career aspirations. You know, and when you go into those conversations about your career aspirations, think about these things. What skills do you enjoy using? What are you good at? Are there gaps in your skill set if you want to move into a certain position or develop in a certain way that need filling? How are you going to fill those skill set gaps? What kind of work do you prefer to do? Do you prefer to work alone with co-workers? But think about the questions that you need to ask yourself before having any kind of conversation. So sometimes you can do a lot of the groundwork first. Yes, at some point, ideally, you want to have that career development conversation with your manager, but it may not always be the case. Important conversations to help you frame what you want, to discuss some of those questions I've just mentioned there, don't have to happen with the person that immediately supervised you. Perhaps you've got a colleague or a mentor, or there's some resources at your company that can reveal unknown career options. Have you had a look inside the company to see, you know, what the different departments do? Do they have information on career opportunities? Is that public? Have you looked on LinkedIn to see similar roles in your company, or the roles that you want to go for, and read what that entails? So you can then start asking these questions about, well, if I do want to go in this direction, you know, who can I ask in confidence about this internally? Where can I research this information? What resources do I have? And get all that knowledge, you know, so when you go into a conversation with your line manager at some point, you're fully prepared. You know what your strengths are, you know what your weaknesses are. You can pull on previous reviews and sort of demonstrate, this is where I've improved these skills, this is where I still have some work to do, this is where I'm interested in going. So have some information to hand and prepare for it. The other thing as well is that career conversations can happen informally. So I don't know about you, but I've worked at companies where they have Yammer, they have all sorts of different like social media type platforms. It might be just a conversation that you overhear. You know, back in the day when we were in the office, is it by the water cooler, the break room, the hallway? But you might just overhear something. Then you never know where that organic conversation might lead into an opportunity. So don't be afraid to research it and ask more about it. Is there an opportunity when you're in a meeting where a cross-department project comes up and you think, do you know what, I really fancy that? And again, go back through your skills, what you need to work on, experience of how you've done that before, how it's going to be a win for the company, or, you know, did you hear in a meeting about a future job opportunity? So there are these formal conversations, but there's also the informal routes, and very often internally, that's how these things happen. There's still a formal process that they have to go through, but sometimes you can just hear about these things in meetings. And as I mentioned before, don't leave it to like a once a year appraisal, you know. Make sure that discussing your strengths, your weaknesses, your career advancement goals is a regular part of your one-to-one meeting with your manager. And as I mentioned, if you're not having that quality time, you need to make time for it. So does your boss. Any good boss should understand that. And if they're not doing it, then they're not really doing that job properly, and they're probably not getting the best from you. So that's something you might need to tackle with them. But if it's part of the kind of regular one-to-ones, you know, if you talk about future opportunities at the right time, whatever that right time feels like you, doesn't have to dominate all meeting, every meeting. Just bring it up now and again when you feel it's the right time, you know. And if it is something that's part of an organic meeting that you have with your leader or your manager, keep those conversations quite concise and to the point. Maybe about like 10 minutes in a one-to-one meeting on your career path, and leave the rest of the meeting to sort of discuss ongoing projects and similar issues, because you just want to plant that seed. You don't want to hijack your boss by going into a fully fledged career overview discussion, a clear career planning discussion, but plant the seed. Make it part of your regular one-to-ones, so you get used to sort of discussing where I need to go, where I need to improve, and then obviously you're going to have your formal appraisals anyway. But again, don't be surprised if your boss says to you, if you do mention career advancement, you spend about 5-10 minutes talking about it, they may well ask you for a different kind of meeting specifically to talk about that, which is a good sign because it shows that they're listening and they want to sort of work with you to explore options. And as I said before, yes, it can happen in your organic, regular one-to-ones with your boss. Let's not leave it to once a year, and you might just pick things up internally on the intranet, in meetings. There might be a project that comes up in a Zoom call and you think, wow. Then sometimes it's about the opportunities that we create. We want to create, we don't want to always wait. So be alert for your site, but be alert to those projects, and also be alert for signs that your manager may need help or support on a piece of training, a project, or a role, be it temporary, that might advance your career. So keep your ears open. You know, if something comes up in a meeting and you think, oh, I could do that, or I'd like to speak to my boss about that, or you ask your boss in your regular one-to-one, you know, is there anything I can help you with? And he's mentioned something, and you feel like, actually, I could be a good fit for that project, and I'd really like to do that, then don't be shy in stepping forward. Create, don't wait. So It's about having that awareness, that antennae open. You need to also, relating to the questions that I mentioned at the beginning of the call, I'll put this on my Facebook page so you can hear those questions that I asked about skills, performance, strengths, weaknesses. You need to have that awareness of what those items are. Excuse me. What are my skills? What are my strengths? What do I need to build upon? What are the values that are really important to me so I've got a clear vision of my career path? Is it I want to work from home all the time? I want to work with other people? You know, is it I want to just be working on my own in a role? Really think about what an ideal role looks like for you, because there's no point putting yourself forward for a role that you don't really want to do just because you feel like you should do it to get in your boss's good books, unless it is something that's going to help you stretch and develop some skills that you need, you know. And with any career, make sure it aligns to, you know, your personal life goals. You know, if you want to, I don't know, expand on your family or spend more time at home with the family, then maybe taking a step up and spending 3 months in Singapore is not the right career role for you, but it might be ideal for somebody else. Is it aligned to your personal life goals? So that's something else you need to think about. And sometimes we do need to change our perspective. You know, we can get into tunnel vision, especially if we've been in a company for a long time and we think, oh, there's no opportunities and nothing. Again, create, don't wait. Don't overlook what might be right in front of you. Sometimes, you know, like when you sit at your desk and maybe you put something new on your desk and you notice it at first, but then it just becomes part of the furniture. So, you know, don't allow that to hold you back either, that kind of stuck in a rut. You know, I'm kind of comfortable here. It's okay, not brilliant, but I'm okay. Because a good career discussion might and should actually force you out of your comfort zone, because the person that's managing you might see skills that need to be developed, strengths that you already have that need to be stretched, and you might be able together to examine a different career path. Or, as I mentioned earlier on in one of the subjects this evening, is you might start developing those ideas for yourself. Okay, now you might have personal career goals, but at some point they've got to fit in with the organisational goals. So your career goals have got to fit in line with the organisational goals. So if you're saying, well, I'd quite like to work in, I don't know, I want to work in Florida, but your company's got no intention of opening up an office in Florida. That's just a random example. You know, make sure that if you want to stay with your company, and this is where a trade-off does come in if you are employed, are your goals in line with the organisation's culture and future plans? Does it align to where the company's going? Or, you know, if what you want is completely left field and there's no opportunities, it's a completely different path, completely different sector, you're probably not going to find it at that company. You might need to think about retraining or moving somewhere else. But if it is aligned to you where your organisation is going, so have a look at their vision, have a look at their annual reports, have a look at what they say in their media centre, you know, to investors. Where is the future direction of the company? Because if you want to stay where you are, you've got a better chance of advancement if you are in sync and it's a win-win for the organisation. Okay, and again, your line manager may well be able to help you with that. So that's where asking open, inquisitive conversations come in. You know, oh, I just wondered I saw this on the website, what's the future direction of the company? Oh, that's something I might be interested in, for example. So, you know, make sure it's aligned. Also, as part of any career conversation, it can stretch your comfort zone, and you may also get feedback. Now, that feedback should be constructive and it should be evidence-based. I say should because it's not always. Sometimes people just say, oh, you're really good at that, or that was good, and you think, well, that's really nice to hear that, but it doesn't really give me a lot of information. So don't be scared of asking, oh, you know, what specifically did you think I was good at? You know, what did you see as my areas of strengths and weaknesses? Or maybe at least start thinking in that way for yourself to really hone your skills, understand more about your strengths and weaknesses. But don't be surprised if you are going in at some point to have that career conversation to improve your career path where you are, then you may well get some feedback. But just make sure you're in a place where you can learn to sit, listen. If you hear something you don't particularly like, we all get that in life. Sometimes we all hear things about ourselves we don't like. Some of it's true, some of it may not be. Some of it may be a misperception. So if your company doesn't do any psychometric profiling, then they're just making assumptions on what your behaviour is. So it may be worth just sitting, listening, going, okay, that's really interesting. Well, actually, and it's not about defending or justifying yourself, but actually sort of saying, oh, well, offering a rational explanation for something. To say, well, actually, when I'm doing a project, that's the way I would evaluate this project or go about it. You know, hopefully your manager should ask open questions about how do you think you're progressing? What do you think are your key skills and your weaknesses or your areas you need to develop? So it's not always easy receiving feedback, but you are going to get that if you're going to go into a career conversation. It's likely you will get some career feedback. Now, what needs to happen at the end of a career conversation, and we've talked about where it's more of a kind of 10-minute conversation with your boss as part of a one-to-one, and they might ask you to schedule another meeting at a different time to talk about this in detail. But at some point, if you really want to have a look at your career path where you are, it's only going to be effective if you've got an action plan and some goals or objectives. One conversation may not make earth-shattering changes to your career. Sometimes it might be small incremental steps. So say, for example, I see that my career path is over here, but the route to get there may not be a straight line. It might be, I have to demonstrate a project here, do this, do that, and then I get to that, particularly if it's something that's more of a newer area for us. So it might not just be a straight line. It may well be, who knows, great. But along the way, you need to have an action plan and key milestones to help you reach that. So it's more than likely your boss would say, why don't you go away and have a think about it, if it's anything like the people I used to sort of manage, etc. And, you know, most bosses are going to be pleased, one would hope, that you're showing an interest. So make sure you've got an action plan, small attainable goals along the way. Make sure at the end of this career conversation, you've got some objectives, and, you know, how will you be able to report back to your boss or update your boss and whoever else you need to about, you know, the progress that you're making? You know, what have you achieved? What results have you achieved? So be prepared to have something like that to hand, okay? So make sure you have got that action plan in place. Now, that may well come at your annual one-to-one review, but there's no reason why it has to be during that annual 1 year, 1 hour, half an hour if it's really rushed because everybody's trying to get home from Christmas conversation. Make sure you've got an action plan in place and make sure you're driving it. Create, don't wait. So, yeah, and again, as I mentioned, sometimes career conversations don't happen with the boss. It might be people in other departments. It might be a colleague that you're working with. And that can be difficult because at some point you're going to have to speak to your line manager. But you want to be, you know, having those open discussions, asking questions, and really making sure what you suggest, what you discuss is a win-win for the company. And sometimes, you know, there's always HR processes within most companies. 9 times out of 10, there's a formal HR process. Don't let that put you off. Sometimes these career conversations happen outside that process. Yes, when you go to decide, you know, if you are applying directly for a role, you will go into that process. And, you know, usually roles are offered internally before they are offered externally. But, you know, don't let that put you off because sometimes it does happen outside of a formal HR process. Again, if it's a newly created role, a specific role, it may well be in the system, but it may well be if you've heard about this role before and somebody thinks you'd be a great fit for it, that may well just happen outside of the process. So you're going to have to create your own process for it. And that's where the objectives, the action planning, knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, that's where that becomes really important. You know, and sometimes this stuff can... Oh, I just dropped my pen, sorry. Sometimes this stuff... I'm just going to get my pen. As I said, sometimes this stuff is like pretty unplanned. It doesn't always, you know, happen in a planned basis. I mean, very often, you know, many of the roles that I had in the past, actually didn't come from my personal review, because personal reviews, you know, whether you have them annually, some companies have them annually, you might have them more frequently. Sometimes that whole process is a bit of a pain. People rush it. They shouldn't be rushing it. You should allow adequate time for that meeting and space, quiet space for you and your manager to discuss it. But very often that's just not the case. So you may well find that these important career discussions are happening with other people in a more organic way. The other thing, if you want to lead yourself into a nice career conversation, is understand the politics of, you know, the processes and the politics of your organisations. You know, I don't know if you've ever heard the expression, oh, well, that's just how we do things around here, or that's just how things are done around here. That means that there are certain ways that people find roles. Now, you might think that's fair or unfair. It depends on what you value, but sometimes that is the reality. Sometimes it is about networking, building relationships with other departments. You know, the same as it would be if you walked in for a job interview, albeit within a shortest period of time, you've still got to build that relationship with the person sitting across the table. So why is it going to be different in a company? So whenever you're in a company, I always encourage people, you know, and you can still do that online. You can show your presence in meetings. You can make a good impression. You can volunteer for projects. You know, be visible, raise your profile. I mean, if there are internal kind of, you know, there's things like Yammer, Facebook, internal Facebook called, I think it's called Workplace. Other places where you can be visible to people. Think about how you're coming across on those. Comment on posts. You know, you might think, oh God, this is a bit creepy, but it's not. You want to put yourself forward. You want to be visible, so make yourself visible, but visible in the right way. Understand how to crack the system, how stuff gets done. You know, it might be a very formal process. It might be really informal, as in, do you fancy that job? You know, you never know. But navigate the system, understand the system, but always end it with action. You know, what's the career? What's the objective here? What's the plan I'm going to take? You know, what are the small little steps I'm going to take along the way? How long is it? What timeline are we working to? How are we going to check in with each other and make progress? Whether it's a project that's going to lead you to that direction or that step up, and it will help you manage the stress of any new role as well. So that's really, really important. Yeah, so have a look back on your experience as well. What's worked well before? What worked well before? When you had career success, how did you get that career success? What skills did you apply? How did you go about it? Would that work where you are now? Or has a company changed? There is a different way of doing things, you know. But really reflect on your own ambitions, your strengths, your weaknesses, what you enjoy the most, what you really value at work, what environment do you like, what do you really like, and what do you really enjoy doing? What are some of the things that, you know, you want to do less of? You know, think about all that before you decide to have any kind of career discussion, be it formal, a bit more informal, or before you find yourself sticking your hand up in a meeting and volunteering for something, as sometimes that does happen. So, you know, and the upshot is, whatever happens, a robust adult career conversation will build your confidence, whatever happens, okay? Because you'll know you've done your best. As I said at the beginning, you're creating, you're not waiting. It holds up a mirror for you to really reflect on your skills, your performance, think about feedback, your strengths, your weaknesses, blah, 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 all the stuff I've mentioned. It allows you to see how the organisation sees you and how well you fit in with that culture. I've worked in organisations where, you know, I was still a similar person. I've adapted and modified over the years with the experiences that my life and my career has given me. But there's a lot of me that's pretty much similar, you know. There's a lot that's changed. But some cultures just haven't suited me and some have. And it's about understanding that. Where are you going to really thrive? Do that, you know, do that bit of groundwork with a positive focus, reflect on your own abilities, have a change in perspective, be able to think, well, how does the organisation see me? Am I happy with that? You know, and if you go in and sort of have these conversations, you know, have a career conversation, be it formal, be it informal, be it just volunteering for a project, you know, this will help you build confidence, because a career, it either happens to us or we create it. And I'm sure we've all been in, you know, any number of situations. And as I say, even if the company's going through a lot of changes, but do you know what? You want to stay because you like it there. And there's lots of things about, you know, being employed there that suits you. Then still try and negotiate, still ask these questions, still do all the stuff I've talked about on the call if you want to stay, to get yourself in the right position, you know, to show that there's a win for you, a win for the company, because they haven't got to, you know, get somebody else in to do the role. You could do that role, you know, so be open to that. And there will be, I'm sure, quite a few triggering moments through these conversations. Sometimes these conversations do trigger us a little bit because it holds a mirror up and that's a bit uncomfortable. But take a deep breath, reflect, and just make sure, you know, you're giving yourself the time and attention to spend time on the questions, spend time with your boss. You know, it is not up to your boss to really help you sort your career out. I know that might come as a bit of a shock. Some bosses are better than others. Some companies will have a very, very clear career path, but it is also up to you to make those conversations happen and demonstrate your willingness to have those conversations. Okay, so that was a few tips there on career conversations to have. As I said, I've had a couple of weeks off just doing some things here. I hope you're all well. And I know there was a couple of videos I was going to do on focus and another one on different techniques for managing some anxious thoughts. So I will catch up on those. I'll probably do them over the next couple of days or so, because I just had a bit of a break from the videos because I was doing other stuff, taking some time out. But this was all about career development conversations. I haven't covered every career conversation you would have, but I've talked about some general principles about putting yourself in the driving seat, not waiting, creating, whatever the situation is, so you can be proud, look back at yourself in confidence and know that you've learned something about how to have these conversations, where they happen, in all their different formats, formal, informal, and everything in between. And you've learned a bit about yourself in the process. Okay, any questions, feel free to drop me drop me a direct message or put a comment underneath the video. And if there are any topics you'd like me to cover, then please just drop me a line and I'll be happy to cover them for you. Have a great weekend, everyone. Take care. Thanks for watching. Bye.